Hi, welcome to Couch's Corner. I am guest host Kevron Pu McKool, and I am here with Dave, and we are talking about the amazing, the spectacular, the
menace,
the superior, the clone, Spider-Man.
Yeah, Spider-Man. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
I noticed this is the first episode Dane is not hosting, so I'm guessing that's due in part to me and something I must have said in a previous episode.
He didn't tell me, but he did look
Heavily
like
implied.
his feelings were a little hurt
Well,
when he asked me to do this somehow. So
he knows what he did.
yeah, I guess so.
But no, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So we are talking about Spider-Man over 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Steve Ditko and Stan Lee created The Amazing Spider-Man in Amazing Fantasy number 15. Dave, what's your draw to Spider-Man?
I've been reading Spider-Man my whole life. I've been reading comics since like 5 or 6, and I think I had a Batman or maybe an X-Men comic kind of before, but interestingly enough, when the Clone Saga started, which I'm sure is a whole different thing, but that's when I really got into Spider-Man, and for a couple of years when I was a kid, I was really into him. Then they killed the Spider-Man clone, and when I got into Spider-Man, he was like just becoming the main Spider-Man. So to me, he was Spider-Man.
Right.
So they killed Spider-Man to me, and I said, I'm not reading these anymore. So I stopped for a few years, and then around the time of the Sam Raimi movie, when that was getting into pre-production and stuff, Ultimate Spider-Man started by Brian Michael Bendis, and that got me back in. And since then, it's like a drug almost for me. It's really bad.
Yeah, there's a lot of it out there, and I think Ultimate Spider-Man was a really good start, or a good place for a lot of people to start as well. That's one of the places where, I picked up as well. I'm also a Spider-Man fan, but it's nice because it's kind of a modern twist on the whole Spider-Man universe, because it's, it started around 2000.
Yeah.
And it was a little more up to date. It wasn't this like everyone's kind of stuck in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, it was
kind of feel.
It was a great time to like update some of the villains and the characters, make them a lot more interesting. Like the Beetle, for instance. I know he hasn't been in the series a lot, but he's one of those that I can think of. And especially the way the writing is done by Bendis, he's got a lot more of a modern, snappy kind of film kind of dialogue compared to Stan Lee. You read the old Stan stuff and it's so melodramatic and not the way people actually talk. So there was a lot with Ultimate Spider-Man, and I've gotten a few people back into comics by giving them that.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great place to start. It's funny, Stan Lee wrote Spider-Man for a long time. If you ever read anything even closer to now that he has written, he still kind of has that same style of like, hey, true believers, check this out.
Yeah, very enthusiastic and loud. Everyone ends with an exclamation point. They're all screaming.
Yes. So, as you said, you've been collecting for a long time. We have here a lot of different issues that you have, but there's also a lot of different incarnations. There's the clone, which you had stated, who was
Ben Reilly, Scarlet
Spider.
Yeah.
There's the futuristic ones. There's the Ultimate Universe. There's all
the noir
all kinds of stuff.
They have the smaller ones like the noir. Yeah, there's a lot of versions. I've never really read 2099. That's one of those that I'm sure I'll get to one day. I've never read that. I've never read the noir. I've read Ultimate. I read the main Spider-Man title, but it is astounding how many different versions there are out there.
Yeah, and it's all, a lot of it's done really well, and it's all kind of timeless. Spider-Man 2099 set in the future, and it's not Peter Parker anymore. It's someone else who gained the Spider-Man abilities, but it still kind of has that same feel. And I think the draw of kind of Spider-Man compared to, say, Superman, Batman, Captain America, anything like that, is, Spider-Man really has to keep his secret identity because he wants to keep his family safe, but at the same time, he doesn't want anyone to know, and he has a hard time sometimes keeping his identity, or his identity and Spider-Man persona separate.
Yeah, they intercede a lot, I guess, if that's the right word. And being Spider-Man always messes him up trying to be a good friend or family member or boyfriend.
Even hold down a job.
Hold down
sometimes.
a job. Yeah, I mean, especially like in Spider-Man 2, the movie, that really showed how he really can kind of get caught up in it.
Yeah.
But he saves the day.
That he always does. Now,
Yeah.
how do you feel about the movies? And second question to that, the Sam Raimi movies to the more recent movie, and the Amazing Spider-Man 2 isn't out yet, but
yeah,
there's a lot of trailers.
I'm a big fan of the movies. I'm a big movie guy in general. So Spider-Man plus a movie sounds just amazing. And I think when the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie came out, I thought like, oh my God, this was perfect. This was so great, and I just absolutely loved it. Even with like the lame costume for Green Goblin, I thought at least the Spider-Man costume looked really accurate. Then Spider-Man 2 came along, and that is just one of my favorite movies in general. I think it's so well done. And I've noticed the past couple of years, if you watch the first Raimi movie, it doesn't hold up that well.
Oh.
Like, it's a little corny and hokey at points, and like the way we do superhero movies has kind of changed.
Right.
But it's still good. I still have such like a love and nostalgia for it. And I think Tobey Maguire is a great Spider-Man. I think there's some people that seem to not like him, but he really reminds me of the kind of Stan Lee era Spider-Man.
Right.
Especially like almost the Steve Ditko Spider-Man. But then with the new ones, and Spider-Man 3, I know everyone kind of poo-poos on it, but I like it to an extent. It does some bad things. I always complain, people complain about the wrong things.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, he's like dancing and crying, and I'm like, no, they changed the killer of Uncle Ben. Like that's like the worst thing they could have ever done. So it's got its faults for sure.
Sure,
But there's
absolutely.
a few things I kind of like about it. It starts off kind of good, just by the end it all falls apart.
Yeah, I think they tried to put too many villains in at once. And I mean, if you look at it kind of, if they did separate parts or even somehow
A fourth movie?
made them intertwine a little better.
Oh, yeah.
They could have really, the third movie could have been a lot better, because I like all the stuff with Sandman.
Yeah, it was very interesting to give him like development, and Venom. They should have just set him up for like a fourth movie.
Right.
That would have been better. But I hear that Raimi was not a fan of Venom. He wanted Vulture originally, and he had like Ben Kingsley like willing to do it.
Right.
And the studio's like, I'll do Venom.
Yeah.
And I don't know how Venom trumps Ben Kingsley. I don't like Vulture. I'll admit, Venom's way cooler, but I don't get, if you have Ben Kingsley, why are you not doing it?
I think that was part of the draw to Venom, where they were like, everyone's asking for it, so we got to throw it in, and here's Topher Grace to play Venom.
Yeah. It's weird though, because it's like if everyone's asking for Venom, then do a full Venom movie, not like almost a cameo at the end.
Right.
And I mean, it's kind of interesting. In a way, it almost thematically kind of works. It's just as the fan, you want more of Venom. And I know people complained about Gwen Stacy being in it, but now that they do the reboot with Gwen Stacy, you're like, well, now I think it's kind of cool that the girl he's like, kind of interested in is Gwen Stacy instead of like, nameless college girl, that they created for the movie, personally. Right. And as far as the new movies go, it's funny, I didn't love the first one when I first saw it, just because, like, obviously I'm such a fan of Spider-Man. I'm like, I know the origin. Just get on with it.
Yeah.
So I thought it was kind of a mistake to spend. I mean, you have to. If you're going to do an origin, you might as well do it.
Right.
But having it been like, that's the fourth Spider-Man movie. Half of the movies were the origin at this point.
Yeah.
But once the second half kicked in, I thought it really got going. I thought Andrew Garfield did a pretty good job. He reminded me a lot more of like the Ultimate Spider-Man. So it's kind of interesting how the two contrast.
He was a little more like, he wasn't quite the nerdy guy. I mean, he was to an extent, but not like the super like oh, I still get beat up. And,
the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man was probably honestly like a little too nerdy. In real life, we would all be like, yeah, I don't like Peter. He's like, yeah, he's a nice guy, but he's a little, I don't know, he's a little quiet, weird. Like the Andrew Garfield one, you could be like, no, like Pete's a good guy. He's kind of stupid around some of the guys who can beat him up sometimes and gets himself in trouble. Yeah. But I'm really excited for the next one. I got to go to San Diego Comic-Con this past summer, and I got to see like the footage ahead of time, and they had the cast and crew there. And that was like really exciting. And they had Andrew Garfield in the suit.
Oh yeah, I saw that on various blogs.
Yeah, so that was really cool. And I'm a big Electro fan. So I'm really excited that he's the villain, and I just love Paul Giamatti. So just the fact that he's in it is great.
Yeah, it's weird to see Rhino kind of looking a little more like a Transformer, but there's no real way compared to the original Rhino, who's just like a giant dude in a rhino suit.
Yeah, that would look pretty bad. It would make the Green Goblin costume and Raimi's look like really good.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think they did really well with the supporting cast in the Amazing Spider-Man movie too. Like, I forget the guy who played Uncle Ben in the newer
Martin
one.
Sheen?
Martin Sheen.
Yeah,
he seemed like a little more like come here, Pete. Life's gonna be rough, and like a guy who would really just. He'd be nice and he'd be really neighborly and always lend a hand, but at the same time, he's not just like, oh, I only have this one thing to say.
I'm just going to be the angelic voice of virtue.
Right,
yeah, because Cliff Robertson's was definitely more of like, because even like Peter shifts his chores and he's still like, oh, hey, come on, let's talk about your problems.
Yeah,
not like, hey, you didn't show up like Uncle Ben in the new one does.
So I'm excited for the second one. I agree that all the villains look pretty great.
Yeah, now that they've set it up, I'm excited to see what they do now that they can run with the story, because they did a good job with establishing all the characters in the first one. So
yeah,
I've definitely grown to like it a lot more than my initial view.
It's one of those problems though that I know a lot of the movie companies have are having now, because Marvel's on this hot streak of their movies. They're not going to be able to make any kind of crossovers because in the comics, I'm not sure if you read them, Spider-Man is on a few of the Avengers teams.
Yep. Yeah, it's such a bummer that he can't be on an Avenger movie.
Yeah.
Because I think the Avengers was just like the greatest thing in the world, and I'm like, oh, if Spider-Man was in that, it would have been just even better.
Right.
And it kind of works that he's always been like, until like 2004 when he joined the Avengers, but he was always that loner hero.
Yeah.
So it kind of works, but I know that they just announced like a month ago or something that they were going to try to do a Venom and Sinister Six movie, so they could have some kind of universe-building Spider-Man world, which seems a little kind of crazy to me.
Yeah.
I guess now we're getting the Venom stuff that way.
Yeah, that'd be pretty great, and eventually they'll get to Carnage, which I heard someone saying that Carnage, who for anyone who doesn't know, is basically Venom, but the symbiote is attached to a murderer. And, they're like, we want to make a Carnage movie, and it's got to be PG-13. But it's kind of like, taking this terrible villain who just kills everybody and just trying to make it less murder-y. You can't really do it.
Yeah, and his costume is just like red. He looks like blood. He looks like slaughter already. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how they do making a villain movie. And I guess that's something we haven't seen in superhero films yet.
Right.
So it'll be really interesting to see if they succeed, or if at the end of it we're all just going to be like, with the Venom, I understand. I don't know if you read the new Venom series, but how Flash Thompson has the symbiote and he's kind of like a government agent.
He's a hero now.
Yeah.
Basically, he was the Venom symbiote was attached to Spider-Man, and then it became a supervillain.
With Eddie Brock, and then I don't know if there's
someone else on the Thunderbolts team.
Scorpion.
Scorpion, yeah.
That was weird, and it was a bummer for me because I love Scorpion. And I was like, no, I want Scorpion as Scorpion, not Scorpion as Venom. And now it's on Flash Thompson, who's like the hero. So I guess.
And he's on. He was on a bunch of teams as well. He was on Secret Avengers. He's on Thunderbolts now, which is completely different than the Thunderbolts was before. But it's interesting to see the evolution, and even most recently, they included that in the Superior Spider-Man storyline.
Yeah, the Superior Spider-Man, where Doc Ock has infiltrated Peter Parker's mind and is posing as Peter Parker pretty much, and Peter's kind of dead.
And he's Doc Ock switched minds, not even brains, but minds.
Just minds.
Somehow.
They switched. Yeah, Freaky Friday.
Right.
Peter became Ock. Ock became Peter.
They both said, "I want to see what your life is like for one day." And too bad, Doc Ock was
like had
in
24
the
hours
hospital
to live
and dying.
Yeah, so it was like his master plan all along, and then he just had to let the clock tick down, and then Ock died. with Peter still in his body, and then it's very weird to like explain it to people.
Right.
Or like, well, wait, what happened? And then you explain it to them, and they're like, why do you read comics? That sounds like so weird. And you're like, it's not that bad. It's like it's very well
more
written,
interesting than it sounds, and it's a fun read.
But with any comics, you almost like describe the plot to them, and then people are like, really? Like that's what you spend your time reading? And you're like, no, it's cool. It just sounds a little ridiculous.
Come on, guys, comics are cool.
Mom, come on.
But there are some people who are, I work at a comic store, and lifetime Spider-Man readers were just so outraged by this one change that really shook the whole foundation, which they have to do every once in a while to keep things fresh. And they were just like, can't read Spider-Man anymore. Marvel has ruined Spider-Man for me. It's like,
I always think that's drastic when that happens.
I agree. But it does also attract new people who are like, oh, so what's going on with this? And I mean, as comic readers, I'm sure you've noticed they kind of repeat storylines over and over again. And you also know almost no one's in comics will stay dead.
Yeah.
I think Uncle Ben
and Gwen Stacy are probably ironically the only two exceptions to that rule. It used to be Bucky as well, but then Ed Brubaker brought him back, so then it was like, I guess Uncle Ben and Gwen.
Ted Cord, the Blue Beetle.
Oh yeah.
No one cares enough to bring him
they're
back.
like forgotten characters also. Those guys. It's funny because when Brand New Day happened, Spider-Man and Mary Jane were married for like 20 years in the comics.
Which Joe Quesada hated.
Joe Quesada hated, and guys like us, we grew up with them together.
Yeah.
And there was a brief period in the, I think it's late 90s, early 2000s, where they kind of almost killed Mary Jane, but they right away told you she's not dead, but Peter thinks she's dead. And it's like a weird way they almost tried to get rid of the marriage. And then J. Michael Straczynski came on and really kind of got them back together, but his last arc was about having to end their marriage so that the new status quo would be a single Spider-Man. And Joe Quesada was like, we can't have divorce happen.
Right.
It'll age the character. So instead, the logical reason was, well, Aunt May had been like almost fatally wounded and stuff. We won't get into that whole backstory.
She'll never die.
She'll
always be 80 years old, whatever.
So the devil, the Marvel Universe devil, came to Spider-Man. He goes, I'll make you a deal. I'll save your aunt's life, but I'm going to go back in time and make that you and Mary Jane never got married. I'm gonna take your love. And they agree to this. I feel like they missed a very like Larry David opportunity of like explaining, like, she's an old lady.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to give up this because she got shot. I mean, she's like 89 years old. Why should we throw this away? Or in like the inverse, like, listen, I can't stay in this marriage. My aunt's dying.
Yeah.
Okay, I could save her just by getting rid of this. But anyway, they got rid of the marriage, and they kind of changed some of the timeline. Like all of a sudden, Harry Osborn was alive again.
Yeah.
And I remember I was pretty upset about that.
It was the Superman punching the infinite wall, where it's just like, oh, well, this happened, and here's some of the ramifications.
Yeah.
And now everyone's back, and we're just kind of starting it over, but without being like, nah, forget the past 10 years. Didn't happen.
Yeah, and like the excuse that like Quesada said was like, well, all the stories still happened. They were just living together. They just didn't have the marriage license. And you're thinking like, oh yeah, because they would just live together like this. Like it would just go on that way. But the ironic thing for me is they started Brand New Day. They had a rotation of writers, and it was coming out 3 times a month, like Dan Slott, Mark Guggenheim, Mark Waid at one point, Joe Kelly.
A real good group of writers.
Really good group of writers, and I have to say that like that 100-issue arc after that of the Brand New Day was probably one of my favorite eras of Spider-Man. They did such a good job. Yeah. All of the sudden, I'm now like, oh yeah, he should totally be single. This is like way better than when he was married.
Yeah.
So it really kind of taught me a lesson about like, I'm going to wait till the story plays out before I jump and start screaming about how I hate it.
Yeah, it's only things written by Grant Morrison for me where it's just kind of like, all right, I'll see how this plays out, as opposed to with Grant Morrison where it's like, I don't get this. I'll never get this. Never mind.
I don't know where you would buy the drugs to understand his stuff.
Probably,
it's so out there.
Probably Cambodia.
Yeah, somewhere pretty crazy.
So Spider-Man has one of the larger rogue groups, villains and bad people, I guess. Villains, that's the one word. Do you have a favorite villain?
You know, I have a couple of favorite villains. Everybody always thinks the Spider-Man villains, and they go like, oh, Green Goblin or Doc Ock. But my 3 that aren't either like those 2, and those 2 are great. I mean, Green Goblin, you know, kills Gwen Stacy, and Doc Ock's just Doc Ock. But I'm a big fan of Scorpion, as I mentioned earlier. Scorpion, Electro, and Shocker. But I feel like Electro and Shocker are kind of similar. Powers
pretty
to an
similar,
extent.
but
But for some reason, those 3 I kind of gravitate towards a lot. You know, I do like Venom and I like a lot of his rogues. I really think he's got a good rogues gallery. Do you have like a particular favorite?
I don't really. I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't actually like Doc Ock.
Oh yeah.
Because it was just kind of like that. Foiled again. I'll get you.
Yeah.
And so he's on the bottom of my list.
Yeah,
but
it's probably just kind of a cooler design of a character and the way he fights.
Right.
You know, I liked what they did with him in Spider-Man 2. They gave him a little depth, but I can understand where you're coming from.
I'd say one of my top guys, though, is actually Lizard. And they touched upon this with that later in the Brand New Day run, if you want to call it that, where it was basically like Dr. Kirk Connors, who turns into the Lizard. He's like, help, I don't want to be the Lizard. He does really bad things, and then the Lizard took over, and the result of it was that Kirk Connors' mind was stuck in the Lizard body, where he's like, this really sucks, but I do have my arm. But he's always been one of those guys where, you know, it's kind of like the Wolfman. Where it's like he doesn't realize he's doing these things.
The tragic sort of character.
And then he changes, and then he's really bad. And
yeah, I thought they did a decent job with him in The Amazing Spider-Man. But the one thing I was kind of upset with is that they didn't talk about his son at all, because I think that's what makes him so interesting with the Lizard, is the dynamic of, like, he's got a son he wants to, you know, take care of and stuff, and he's got the family and all that. But he's got this, compared to a lot of the other villains who are just like, I'm just a bad person, I'm going to be a villain.
Right.
His is so much more the Jekyll and Hyde. I was kind of hoping to see a little bit of that, but he's good.
Yeah. There's actually a new book, or a fairly recent book that's been coming out. I think it's up to issue 6 or 7, called The Superior Foes of Spider-Man. I'm not sure if you read that one at all.
Ironically enough, I've only read the first issue, so I'm going to continue. It's just I read them digitally on this like digital app when like after 8 months or something they get put on there. So that's why I've only had a chance to read the first issue like 3 weeks ago. But it was kind of neat. Yeah, it was very interesting. It was such an odd little comic.
It's an interesting take on the villains because, you know, you only see the villains when they're either like coming up with the plan and being like, Spider-Man will never catch me, or when they're fighting Spider-Man. And this is more where it's like the things that happen when Spider-Man's not around, and they'll still do like small heists. And it's not, it's a team of the new Sinister Six, which is
Shocker's in it.
Shocker's in it, yeah. New Beetle, Boomerang, who throws boomerangs. That's and it's all these kind of B and C list.
Yeah, I don't even remember the other 2. It's not even 6
Chameleon.
of them, is it? Right? It's like
Chameleon
5 of them.
is technically in it, but he's in
Really?
jail.
Oh, okay.
And
that's funny.
It's kind of like them planning stuff, and it's a really weird take because Spider-Man does occasionally show up, and he does beat the crap out of them, but it's like the inner workings of how their team does things.
It's like Ocean's 11.
Kind of, except
Here's the
with
plan,
bad
guys.
Yeah, and then it's like it goes wrong. And even in the first issue, it's like they show them robbing places, and one of them, ironically, was a comic book store, and they're like, these are all the valuable comics, right? And it's like, well, not this one, but this one. It's like, great.
That's funny.
I'm taking these.
Yeah, I'll have to keep reading that. It was pretty interesting from what I saw.
Yeah, it's an interesting take, and you know, I love anytime you can kind of go out in the universe a little more.
Yeah.
Because it gives you not just the one perspective, which is always Spider-Man.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially with him, it's not like he's really he's part of Avenger teams, but it's not like a Fantastic Four or X-Men where there's a lot of other people to focus on per se. So yeah.
Do you have a Spider-Man over the years has had a lot of different costumes as well? You know, we have here the You have the black costume, the original one, the new Superior Spider-Man, the 2099. Do you have a favorite costume?
You know, his costume hasn't changed too drastically over the years. It's funny because with Superior Spider-Man, they've kind of changed it every few months. It seems like he kind of keeps evolving a little bit.
Yeah, he keeps upgrading it.
I have actually liked how he's drawn in Superior Spider-Man, but I'm really I'm a fan of Mark Bagley and the way he draws Spider-Man quite a bit, especially like Ultimate Spider-Man. I feel like from what I've seen, the costume in the new movie looks really based after his like art, with especially the way the eyes are and everything, how big they are.
Yeah.
So I guess I would kind of go like a Mark Bagley Ultimate Spider-Man, which is still more of a traditional Spider-Man, but I do like it when he has like the bigger eyes.
Sure.
I guess. But in 2099, I haven't really read enough of to know if I like that costume. I have a couple video games I've played it in. The Superior look is actually pretty good though, getting rid of some of the stripes and stuff like that. So. And I do have a lot of nostalgia for Scarlet Spider's costume with the hoodie.
Yeah. Mine is surprisingly, you can't go wrong with the traditional one, but the Iron Spider.
Oh, really?
suit,
Oh, that's interesting.
It's kind of interesting.
Everyone was like so against that when it happened. Another one of like fan outcry. I think it was going to be around forever.
Yeah. It was just kind of one of those funny things, but it kind of looked good.
Kind of did, yeah. It kind of grew on me, and it's funny because I think if I'm remembering the timing right, that costume came out before the Iron Man movie even.
Yeah.
And so it's not like it was like, oh, Iron Man's popular, let's throw it in on Spider-Man. It came out like a year or two before that, which just is kind of funny.
It just kind of happened really. It worked well with what was going on in the Marvel universe at the time, and then right after that, he reverted back to the black costume. Because he had sold out to the man and revealed his secret identity, which everyone had conveniently forgot about after the whole new.
The brand new day. Yeah, thank God. That was stupid. I don't think he would have ever done that. I really don't think he would have ever done that.
No, I agree. And that's
after Gwen Stacy, I really just don't think he'd be like, oh, hey, everybody, I'm Peter Parker.
Yeah. So. It was just kind of, and it's why Aunt May got shot.
That's why Aunt May got shot.
If he just didn't reveal his identity, he'd still be married.
Yeah, he'd still be married.
And Aunt May would have never been shot and then unshot, and who knows?
Who knows? Yeah,
I'm sure they'll never touch upon that stuff in the movie.
Yeah, that
but
would
that's
be really funny. They just go really extreme and complicated.
Yeah. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us here on Couch's Corner. I am Kev Paul McKool, here with Dave.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate
You're welcome.
It.
And thanks for watching, True Believers.